This is this is Neil's Han Dynasty. Please like, share, subscribe. Buy some silver and some platinum. Be kind, helpful, and grateful, because it's better than being a jerk. I've done a couple of videos on Polish spending on defense going through the roof, and didn't get that many views, but I did it, and that's cool. No one want to watch it, but it's history. You can view back in history and find out when I brought this information forward. Now some big news YouTube station with 876,000 subscribers 2 to 3 months later, after I do 2 or 3 reports on Poland and their military expansion, has decided to do a video on Polish military expansion. And I'm only showing you this to validate that I brought it to you a month and a half, 2 months ago. But here it is by some bigger channel even. These guys here, business, whatever. It was just done 8 hours ago. It's got 167,000 million views, and mine got 6.
Poland has paraded its military hardware on the streets of Warsaw.
Poland's military is flexing its arsenal in the largest parade in decades. It's a significant display of how billions have been spent on new equipment since 2014.
This year's parade is the largest since the Cold War.
We are modernizing our armed forces. This year, we'll allocate over 4% of GDP on defense.
This time around, Poland is taking no chances.
This isn't just flexing muscles, though. The country wants to get the biggest army in the European Union, bigger than the armies of Germany, France, or Italy. Poland has one of the most ambitious military strategies in the continent, as it wants to double the size of its armed forces in just 2 years. The nation's military personnel is planned to grow from 150,000 to 300,000 in 2025. Just for comparison, that's more than double the size of the UK's armed forces. The government in Warsaw also plans an unprecedented rise in military spending, going from 2.4% of GDP towards 5% of GDP eventually. That's the highest military spending in the entire NATO alliance. Speaking relative to GDP, the target range for NATO countries is only 2%. The 5% figure even beats Poland's NATO ally, the United States. Right now, Washington spends around 3.5% of GDP on its military. Even though Poland's economy is a lot smaller than the US, this rise in defensive spending still gives it billions of dollars in additional funding. The Polish government is using this money to purchase tons of military equipment to get the largest land army in Europe. With deals like this, Poland is trying to get one of the largest armies in Europe.
First off, I did a report where they spent $5.6 billion getting those. That was about 6 or 8 weeks ago. And what this large channel who has lots of money and lots of subscribers didn't tell you is they are also the second largest owner of attack jets, or helicopters, 82 Apache attack helicopters they bought from the United States, making them the second largest air force in the world to have attack helicopters. That is not on this list. So this guy with all his subscribers isn't doing nearly as good a job as I did for you guys.
In terms of military hardware, and everyone who knows a bit of Polish history understands why. Poland doesn't want to get wrecked by other European countries ever again. Looking at the actions of the government in Warsaw, it seems for the worst-case scenario, a war with Russia. When Putin invaded Ukraine, it became clear that peace in Eastern Europe is far from guaranteed. Right now, tensions are rising at the border between Belarus and Poland, with Polish and Belarusian troops preparing for the worst. When Putin sent Wagner troops to Belarus, Poland decided to move 10,000 troops to the border due to mounting concerns. After Prigozhin's death, Wagner isn't that big a concern anymore, but the tensions at the Belarusian border haven't gone away. Recently, Russia has moved short-range nuclear weapons to Belarus, further escalating the situation. Putin's dictator buddy, Lukashenko, is glad to help Russia in its conflict with the West, which has become a real threat to Warsaw. However, Poland isn't sitting idly and letting this happen. With its military buildup, Warsaw is trying to protect itself from its historical rival in the Kremlin. However, this military buildup goes far beyond that. Right now, Poland is on the path to become one of the strongest nations in Europe. Ranging from military might, economic growth to a strong network of alliances, Poland has it all. In this video, we'll talk about Poland's attempt to combat Russia with an unprecedented military buildup. We'll also go over the major geopolitical implications of this development. You see, Poland is using the military buildup to become one of the regional leaders of Europe. Before we dive into this video, consider hitting
The 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland. Within days, German forces are advancing on Warsaw. The nightmare of a new order. Hitler's Luftwaffe bombs cities, killing thousands of civilians. German planes destroy the Polish Air Force. Fear spreads in families. Within 2 weeks, Warsaw is surrounded.
The modern history of Poland is filled with wars and catastrophes. This is all indirectly caused by Poland's geography. Frankly, the country's geography is quite terrible when you look at national security aspects. Poland has no natural defenses, as it's located right at the heart of the European plain. The area is vulnerable to both the east and the west, which can clearly be seen in history. Repeatedly, Poland has been the stepping stone for any power expanding across the European plain. For the entire 19th century, Poland didn't even exist. The previous Polish state fell, partly because of its hardly defendable geography. The territory became occupied by the Prussians in the west, the Russians in the east, and the Habsburg monarchy in the south. When Europe later descended into World War I, it was disastrous for the Poles. After Germany and Russia declared war, the front line fell right into their territory. Many Poles had to fight in the war, as 450,000 Poles died and 1 million were wounded. In 1916, around 2 million people from Poland were fighting in the armies of Germany, Austria, or Russia. After the war ended, much of the country was destroyed because of intense warfare. The occupied territories of Poland were left in ruin. Indirectly, this was due to Poland's unfortunate geography. Because of its central and unprotected position on the map, the Polish territories were heavily targeted. The only positive side of the war was that Poland regained its independence shortly after. Seemingly, this was good news for the country. Poland didn't have to be involved in these terrible wars anymore, right? Well, no. In 1939, disaster struck the country once again. Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union invaded Poland from two sides. Poland lost the unfair fight against these military giants with awful consequences. Both the East and West had to suffer from totalitarian military occupations, with Hitler and Stalin ruling over the country. We don't think you can get worse leaders than that. On top of that, Poland became a front line just like in World War I. The two dictators decided to fight each other, and Poland was the unfortunate country right in between. World War II left an even bigger scar on the country than the previous one, which it remembers to this day. An estimated 6 million Poles died during the war, which is 20% of the pre-war population. Half of the victims were Polish Jews, who were prosecuted by the Nazis. After this horrible episode of history, it didn't get a whole lot better for Poland. The country became ruled by communists in what is known as the Polish People's Republic. For decades, Warsaw was a satellite for Moscow and the USSR. You know, with the gulags and Stalin's left-wing totalitarianism. It was only in 1989 that Poland regained its independence when the Soviet Union fell. The last 30 years have been a very rare time in history, where Poland has been relatively prosperous and secure. It has joined the European Union and the NATO alliance, which has given the country a break from all the chaos. Nevertheless, this Polish history is crucial to understand. The government in Warsaw knows fully well that peace is ordinary. From a historical perspective, it makes perfect sense to try and bolster the Polish defenses. If Poland wants to defend itself as a vulnerable country on the European plain, it needs a strong military. The first steps in this direction were already made in 2012, when the Polish government released a 10-year technical modernization plan. This would improve the armed forces of Poland, as $15 billion worth of weapon purchases were planned. But in 2022, this historical notion of needing a strong military has become as relevant as ever. With the invasion of Ukraine, it has become clear that Europe isn't as safe as everyone thought it was. Ukraine, which is a neighbor of Poland, has experienced the threat from Moscow firsthand. With Putin's attack, many see the revival of Russian imperialism. This raised alarm bells in Warsaw, because Russian imperialism has hurt Poland many times in history. For Warsaw, the threat from Moscow is right next to its border. Poland already shares a border with Belarus, which is regarded as a puppet state for Putin. Southeast of Poland, Russia is trying to creep up on the Ukrainian border, although unsuccessfully. And we shouldn't forget the Kaliningrad exclave, which is a small chunk of Russia directly bordering Poland in the north. This area is highly militarized, and it's sometimes called Russia's fortress on the Baltic Sea. From all of these sides, Poland is threatened by Russia, but the nation itself isn't at risk, right? As Poland is part of NATO, Russia wouldn't dare to attack the country's territory. Because of Article 5 of NATO, a Russian attack would get Moscow at war with the entire alliance, including the United States. An attack on one member state is treated as an attack on everyone.
Anyhow, that's rather long. I just want to let you guys in on a little Polish history, couple weeks, months history as well, with their expansionism of their military might doubling what it was 2 years ago. And that, 2022 is the time period they had to double it from 2012, which is the last end of this report you heard. From 2012, they got serious, said it was going to double it, and that was 2022, and now they're doubling it again. So they are totally getting ready for something. Don't know what, but load up your pantries, buy some silver, some platinum, be helpful, be kind, and be grateful, because it's better than being a jerk, and you'll get a lot further in life. Have a good evening. Talk to you later. Bye.